My species communicates distress through color. When I am professionally neutral, which is most of the time, because that is the job, my skin glows a soft, even amber. It is a useful trait for a diplomat. It cannot be faked. Other species learn quickly that when a Valoran is amber, the Valoran is telling the truth about how calm they actually are. I had been amber for my entire career. 14 years, 3 pre-sentient world assessments, dozens of observation reports, amber the whole time. I am not amber anymore. I want to tell you about the moment my color changed for the first time in my professional life, because I think it explains everything that happened afterward better than any report I could file. It started with a chair, not a ceremonial chair, not a diplomatic chair assigned through the proper channels after years of registration and review. A folding chair, the kind you might use for outdoor seating, made of metal and fabric, carried in by hand and set down on the floor of the Galactic Council chamber at the primary delegate table. In a chamber that had not had anything unprecedented happen in it for longer than most species in that room had existed. A human commander named Sarah Mitchell carried that chair into the chamber herself. She set it down at the table, not in the visitor's observation box where Earth's delegation had been assigned for 63 years. At the table. Before I continue, if stories like this are the kind of thing you find worth your time, subscribe to Ironheart HFY now. New reports from across the galaxy every week. You will not want to miss what comes after this one. Now, this is the story of how that happened. I was there. I am filing this report because what I witnessed deserves an accurate record, and because I do not think the galaxy has fully understood yet what it has been doing to itself for the past 63 years without realizing it. It started, as these things often do, with a clerical error. I did not witness the discovery of the spam folder directly. I learned about it the way most of the galaxy eventually learned about it, through the formal documentation that followed, and later through conversations with the people who were actually in the room. Commander Sarah Mitchell discovered it on an unremarkable morning at the United Earth Fleet headquarters. An analyst named Owen Price had been reviewing the fleet's archived correspondence systems, a routine audit, the kind of task that happens in every large institution and almost never produces anything interesting. This audit produced something interesting. The Galactic Council's communication domain had never been added to Earth's approved sender registry. This was not a deliberate snub. It was an oversight, a small, forgettable administrative gap from the earliest days of human spacefaring, when Earth's systems were young and the list of approved senders was short, and nobody had thought to add an institution that Earth had never formally interacted with. Every message the Galactic Council had ever sent to Earth had been automatically filtered as secondary correspondence. For 63 years. 847 unread messages. The oldest one was 63 years old. I have read the full list since. Mandatory attendance notices. Civilizational classification hearings. Follow-up notices. Final notices. An invitation to the annual Galactic Summit sent every single year 63 times. Into a folder nobody on Earth had thought to check, because nobody on Earth knew that folder mattered. The most recent message was 3 weeks old. It informed Earth that following 61 years of review, and given Earth's continued non-participation in Council proceedings, Earth had been formally classified as a pre-sentient developmental anomaly. I want to be precise about what this classification means, because the Council's language is designed to sound clinical rather than cruel, and I think that design is itself worth examining. The classification did not say Earth was primitive. It did not say Earth was small or unimportant. It used cleaner language than that. It granted Earth observation status. Council representatives could visit and document Earth's progress. Earth would have no voting rights, no treaty protections, no formal recognition under galactic law. In the Council's official language, Earth was, and I am quoting the document directly, a curiosity. Commander Mitchell read that word and did not move for 4 minutes. I am told the analyst behind her stopped breathing for almost as long. What happened next is the part of this story that the rest of the galaxy finds difficult to process, even now, even with the full record available. Commander Mitchell did not panic. She did not convene an emergency session of the Earth government to debate what to do. She did not draft an angry response to 63 years of bureaucratic erasure. She opened a different screen. The United Earth Fleet Registry. Active vessels. Current operational status. The number at the top of that page was 1,021 active warships. I want to sit with that number for a moment, because I think it is easy to hear a large number and move past it without understanding what it actually represents. 1,021 ships, ranging from small patrol-class vessels to deep space carrier groups. Carrier groups that, and this is the detail that matters most, had never once been deployed beyond Earth's own solar defense perimeter. For 40 years, Earth had been building a fleet that size and using none of it for expansion, none of it for conquest, none of it for anything beyond its own solar system. I have studied military build-up patterns across 11 galactic standard classification systems. There is no precedent for a species building strength on that scale and simply holding it, not displaying it, not threatening with it, not using it to negotiate better trade terms or territorial concessions, just building it and waiting. Commander Mitchell looked at that number for a long moment. Then she drafted a message to the Galactic Council Civilizational Registry Office. She typed 4 lines. She read them back. She deleted the 3rd line, which I am told had been, in her own words, too sharp. She replaced it with something that would read as polite to anyone who did not know how polite actually worked. Director Calloway, reading over her shoulder, told her this was going to get a reaction. "Good," she said. "A significant reaction," he said. "I know," she said. He told her that 1,000 warships was not a threat. She corrected him. "It is a delegation," she said. "There is a difference." She sent the message. Then she told her assistant to inform the Senate Oversight Committee that she would be available in approximately 6 weeks, because Earth, as she put it, had a meeting to attend. I should explain my own position in this story, because I was sent to Earth shortly after Commander Mitchell's message arrived, and what I witnessed there changed the rest of this account considerably. I am a diplomatic observer. My role, under the Council's standard protocol, is to visit pre-sentient or non-registered civilizations and document their development without interference. I have done this work for 14 years. I have visited 3 other worlds under this protocol. I wrote good reports about all 3. I felt something like fondness for the species I observed. I expected Earth to be more of the same. A pre-sentient world, organized settlements, primitive transit infrastructure, the standard markers of early industrial expansion. Earth sent a car to collect me. Not a ceremonial shuttle, not an escort vehicle befitting a diplomatic visit. A car, ground-based, driven by a human named Philip Arthur, who shook my hand without hesitation, did not react to my bioluminescence in any visible way, and asked if I needed the air temperature adjusted. I told him I was fine. He said, "Long flight," and merged into traffic. I had traveled 6 light years to reach his planet. He treated this information the way you treat the answer to a question about weather. I watched the city move past the window. I had read the Council's data files on Earth, what little existed, given the civilization's non-registered status. I had expected something consistent with early industrial development. What I saw did not look primitive. It looked like a civilization that had made a series of extremely difficult decisions and was still paying the price for some of them, and had made peace with that. We arrived at a shipyard at 0800 hours. An Admiral General named Kofi Sant was waiting. He shook my hand with a grip that was steady and entirely without aggression, which I found more unsettling than aggression would have been. "Welcome to Dock 7, he said. He did not give me a presentation. He did not hand me a briefing packet. He simply walked, and I followed, and the shipyard opened around us like a sentence that kept adding clauses. Dock 7 held 43 vessels in various stages of maintenance. Large. Not the largest I had seen other civilizations maintain larger ceremonial fleets, but numerous, and clearly not ceremonial. Working ships. The humans moving across them moved the way people move when the work is not for performance. Fast, specific, completely indifferent to being watched. "How long has this dock been operational?" I asked. "This specific dock, since 2019, he said. "The program, it is part of the Unified Fleet Infrastructure Initiative, started in 2041. "And how many docks are there?" I asked. He looked at me with the particular stillness of a person deciding how much of the truth is kind to deliver at once. "We can walk through them if you like," he said. We walked through Dock 8, Dock 9, Dock 10, Docks 11 through 16, connected by a transit rail that took 12 minutes to traverse. Dock 17, which was the largest and which held a class of vessel for which I had no catalogue entry. By the time we reached the observation level above Dock 22, my bioluminescence had cycled through amber to pale gold, to a colour I had not displayed in a professional context in many years. I was not cold. I was not performing a response. The colour simply happened to me. "You had wars," I said. It was not really a question. I said it the way a scientist states a variable. "Constant wars for millennia." "Yes," Kofi said, "with each other." "Yes," I looked at the ships, at the humans on them, at the particular economy of movement that comes from people who have been doing something long enough that the doing has settled into the body itself. "And then you stopped," I said. "Mostly, we redirected," Kofi said. That word sat in the air between us for longer than its length should have allowed. I thought about what redirected meant in the context of a species that had been at war with itself for the entirety of its recorded history, and had then, over the course of roughly 40 years, pointed that energy somewhere else. Not out of some sudden flowering of interspecies enlightenment, from what I could read in the data, from nothing more elevated than practical necessity. They had looked at each other across their last major ceasefire and made a very human calculation. Killing each other was expensive, building was cheaper, and if they were going to build, they might as well build something that would last. "So there is the Council classification," I said carefully. "Pre-sentient. Developmental anomaly. Does that bother you?" Kofi considered the question with what I was beginning to recognize as characteristic thoroughness. The quality of a person who does not give answers he has not actually thought about. "My grandmother," he said, "was born in a village that did not appear on any official map until 1987. The regional government had a classification system too. The village was listed as an unregistered rural settlement, ineligible for infrastructure, ineligible for formal school funding, ineligible for medical supply chains. He paused. She lived in that village for 60 years, he said. It existed for hundreds of years before that. I waited. The map not having it, he said, did not make it not real. It just made the map wrong. I turned back to the ships. The pale gold would not leave my skin. Your message to the council, I said. Commander Mitchell's message. It said you were coming to the next meeting. Yes, he said. The next meeting is in 3 weeks, in the Outer Rim Council chambers, I said. That is 6 light years from here. You have had no diplomatic presence, no registered ships, no council recognition. You have never attended a session before. There is no precedent for arriving at one with no "we will have our paperwork in order," Kofi said. We have been working on it. He said this with the particular serenity of a man who had been working on something for considerably longer than most people understood. I held a question for a long moment before I asked it. How many ships are you bringing? I said finally. How many ships are you bringing? I said finally. Kofi looked at me. The expression on his face was not pride. It was not a performance of power. It was something quieter and more durable than either of those things. The look of a person who has prepared for a very long time for something that is now, finally, beginning. Enough, he said, to make the point without making a threat. I was seated in the Valoran delegation box on the mid-tier of the council chamber when Earth arrived for the session. I want to describe the chamber first because the contrast matters. The chamber was vast, 214 registered delegations seated in tiered formation, designed over centuries to project the accumulated permanence of galactic order. Every species had its assigned place. Every protocol had been settled generations ago. Nothing unprecedented had happened in that room in longer than most of the beings present had been alive. Earth had been assigned a visitor's observation alcove, a glass-walled box on the upper tier. The same alcove used for journalists, educational delegations, and pre-sentient civilizations granted temporary access through the developmental observation program. It had no table. It had no communication terminal. It had padded bench seating and a water dispenser that, according to the maintenance log, had not functioned in 4 years. Commander Mitchell looked at it for approximately 4 seconds when her delegation arrived. Then she walked back to the transport vehicle, found a folding chair from the equipment supply, and carried it through the main corridor of the chamber. I am told 214 delegations watched her do this. I was one of them. The expressions ranged from confusion to what I can only describe as deep concern. She set the chair down on the floor of the main chamber, at the table. Her colleague, a legal counsel named Harriet Doyle, opened a case and removed a small placard. She placed it in front of the chair. It read, simply, Earth. It was handwritten. On cardstock, not laminated. Made, I would learn later, on the flight over, because there had not been time to make it any other way, and because the point was never the quality of the placard, the point was the chair. The council chair was a being named Velon, ancient, in the way that some beings are simply continuous rather than aged. 7-limbed. His species registers stress through a physical shedding of their outer skin layer, a process the Council's own literature refers to with considerable delicacy as a stress molt. He did not begin to molt immediately. He was, to his credit, a professional. The floor recognizes, he said, that there appear to be individuals seated at the primary delegate table who are not on the session registry. Commander Sarah Mitchell, she said. United Earth Fleet. Earth Diplomatic Corps. We received your invitation. A pause from the chair. Earth does not have a registered seat at this table. Earth has a chair, Commander Mitchell said. We brought it. Velon consulted something off-screen. Earth's current classification under Galactic Registry Protocol 7, Section 4, is pre-sentient developmental anomaly, Class C, he said. Under this classification, Earth representatives are entitled to observation access only. Participation in primary chamber proceedings is not. Commander Mitchell placed a document on the table. It was printed, bound. I have since confirmed the exact page count. 1,412 pages. She placed it without ceremony, the way you place a thing when you want the thing itself to speak, rather than your tone of voice. Earth's formal response to the pre-sentient classification, she said, including a full review of the evidentiary basis for the original hearing. The procedural irregularities in a hearing conducted without the subject civilization's knowledge or participation, and Earth's annotated commentary on every galactic treaty signed in the last 63 years that affected Earth's solar system and surrounding space without Earth's consent or representation. A longer pause from the chair. That document is 1,412 pages, Velon said. 1,412, Commander Mitchell confirmed. We had time on the flight over. I watched the chamber in that moment, and I want to describe what I saw as precisely as I can, because this is the part of the story that I believe the rest of the galaxy still has not fully absorbed. 214 delegations had spent 63 years sending Earth formal notices into a void, never once receiving a response, and had quietly concluded, in the comfortable way that large institutions conclude things about civilizations too inconvenient to fully investigate, that the silence meant disinterest. Irrelevance, a species not worth the friction of further inquiry. The silence had never meant disinterest. The silence had been an administrative error in a spam filter, compounding quietly for 63 years, while underneath that silence, an entire civilization continued building, redirecting, preparing not for this moment specifically, because they had not known this moment was coming, but for the general shape of a world where institutions with power eventually find a reason to exercise it against whoever has the least capacity to push back. They had simply made sure that when that day came, they would have the capacity. Velon's outer skin had begun, almost imperceptibly, to shed. The Krellian ambassador present that day on unrelated business, seated 3 tiers up, was, I am told, the first to speak into the silence that followed. He asked, in a voice considerably less certain than his species typically allows itself, what exactly Earth was requesting. Commander Mitchell answered without hesitation. A seat at the table, she said, the one we were always entitled to, and a formal acknowledgement on the record that the classification was based on an absence of correspondence that Earth never actually received. She paused. And an apology, she said. 63 years is a long time to leave someone waiting in a room with a water dispenser that does not work. I do not believe a single being in that chamber laughed. I do not believe a single being in that chamber wanted to. The vote to formally review Earth's classification was called 11 minutes later. It passed by a margin I will not describe as overwhelming, because I believe the word has lost some of its meaning to me after this day, but it passed, and it passed quickly, and it passed by delegations who had spent the previous hour looking at orbital scans of Dock 7 through Dock 22 that Commander Mitchell's office had quietly distributed to every seat in the chamber before the session began. I do not think the scans were a threat. I think Kofi Sant was telling the truth when he told me they were enough to make the point without making one. I have spent considerable time since that day thinking about the 63 years that preceded it. The 847 messages, the folder nobody checked, because nobody on Earth had any reason to believe the Council existed in any form that mattered to their daily lives. I have thought about what would have happened if the filter had never existed, if Earth had received that first invitation 63 years ago and had simply chosen, deliberately, not to respond. I do not think the outcome would have been different. I think Earth would have built the same fleet, held the same line, redirected the same energy for the same practical reasons, regardless of whether the Council ever sent a single message at all. The classification was never really about whether Earth responded. It was about what the galaxy assumed a species must be if it never bothered to ask for a seat at a table that the rest of the galaxy considered the only table worth sitting at. Earth had simply never needed that table the way the Council assumed every civilization eventually would. It had been building its own, quietly, for 40 years, in docks numbered 7 through 22, and likely beyond, while a folder of unread messages accumulated in a system nobody had thought to check, because checking it had simply never been necessary. Commander Mitchell told me something afterward, during a brief exchange in the chamber corridor, as the session adjourned. I asked her, somewhat clumsily, why she had brought the chair specifically. There were other ways to make the same point, a formal written objection, a diplomatic protest through proper channels. She thought about the question for a moment. She said, because the point was never going to land if we asked permission to make it. She said, we spent 63 years not knowing we had been invited. We were not going to spend one more day waiting to be told we could sit down. I have not been amber since. I do not know what color I am now. I have checked with 3 different biological reference texts, and none of them have a name for it. I think, in the loose logic of half-formed theories, that I have not yet had the rigor to properly test, that it might simply be the color of having witnessed something the rest of the galaxy did not yet have a category for. Earth, I am told, has words for a great many things the galaxy has not yet found necessary to name. I suspect they will have a word for this too, eventually I suspect, knowing what I now know about them, that they already do. End of report. Setha, Valoran Diplomatic Observer Corps. Filed without the usual professional distance, because I am no longer certain that distance served any purpose in this account. If you believe that the most powerful response to being ignored is to simply build something undeniable, subscribe to Ironheart HFI. We are just getting started.